And welcome to another episode of 50 Shades of Grey, where I am very lucky to be joined today by Tim, Vincent and Siobhan Wykes. Is that right? Wykes? See, got it right. Who are the hosts of the very popular Suddenly Single that I was privileged to be a part of on the last series. So guys, thank you and welcome for joining me today.
You're very welcome, Elliot. How are you?
Yeah. And thank you for coming on Suddenly Single. You were a firm favourite.
I absolutely loved it. They're doing great, the podcast. So I wanted to get you on stage just to talk about the podcast because you've hit 3 million followers, I saw the other day, which was a fantastic achievement. Sponsors now banging at the door. You're turning people away. So what was the concept behind it? And you two, your relationship, how did it all come around?
Ladies first.
It was a bottle of Pinot Colapso, of which Tim and I share several. And we were talking about the fact, so I'd separated from someone after a long time, and Tim had recently come back from America. He wasn't in prison. He was just on, what were you on? It was at E. I can't even remember.
And that's not drugs, Elliot. That's a channel. Oh, yeah. We went prison and drug references. We've hardly started. Well, E is the rival. I was on Access Hollywood, NBC's entertainment show 6 nights a week. But every time Siobhan explains that to somebody, she said he's been away for a few years and it always sounds like I've done Bird. I'm like, no, I was actually on a big entertainment show for quite a few years. So when we came back, we were bemoaning the fact that we were both what we thought sane, not quite a catch, but reasonable. And we were finding it really hard to date. And then we were discussing dating apps and dating disasters and dating stories that people have shared. And then we just jotted down an idea. I emailed you a couple of things. You had a couple of ideas and it just kind of came out of there. It's not really brain surgery. I interview people for a living. And if you look, it doesn't matter if it's Parkinson or a red carpet or a podcast, you are chatting to somebody, you come up with an interesting subject and a few questions. And dating is just the premise. So you've been on the show, we chat to you, then we bring an expert in and chat a bit more. And then we do the Goldfish Bowl of Truth, where we all take a question out of the bowl. But it's basically chatting. And it's a very fertile and rich subject, dating, as Siobhan and I always have something to ask somebody. And there's always a new story, isn't there, from somebody?
There's always a new story. And I just need to tell you something. I got a DM from a guy called Michael Gunnings. Now, if you, Elliot, or your listeners don't know who he is, a butterfly swimmer in the Olympics, and he's a good friend of Tim and I. Thanks to Suddenly Single, he's got, not only has he been on several dates, but he's now got a potential boyfriend. And he's really delighted.
Wow.
He texted me yesterday.
This is going to be...
I just checked my phone because I don't know if my episode aired then. Because I've had nothing.
Well, we might be like Cilla Black. You know, she had that wedding, didn't she, when she arranged it on Blind Date? We could be the first podcast to have a wedding out of it. No, you should check your DMs regularly. You never know. You might have somebody waiting for you.
Yeah, I have been. And all I find is disappointment.
Harsh, Elliot, harsh.
But this is the thing about Suddenly Single is that the viewers or the listeners fall into two camps. You're single and you want to hear other experiences, or you're married and it's a bit of rubbernecking and you want to hear about what it's like on the side of the pond because you can't necessarily find out firsthand what it's like. And even we have, you know, you're a younger guy on our scale of interviewing people, but we had Jan Leeming on, who I think is in her very early 80s and is still looking for love. So, you know, it's right across the board: male, female, gay, straight, transgender, living in the countryside, living in the centre of a city. Everybody has problems and raised eyebrows about dating.
Do you guys not find, though, that there are certain personality traits that we all share, that for the reasons that why we're single, where you see other people, I don't want to say stuck in relationships, but I'm going to say stuck in relationships, where we're sort of those sort of people that are probably romantics, won't settle and want like the whole thing. I described it on another podcast. Like, we've grown up with Lionel Richie songs and rom-coms with this idea of a fairy tale ending, and I think we've just bought into it. But I think we all share definite personality traits. I don't know if you found that with all your guests.
Well, I think Tim and I are different. I think you and I differ on this. I've said to you before, both of you, that it's like looking in a mirror, Elliot. You and Tim are very similar personalities. So I think you probably did on that. I don't agree on that. I was left. I didn't want to be left. I didn't see it coming. And I think women on the whole prefer to be monogamous and prefer to be in one relationship. And yeah, I mean, now I'm older, I think I've probably changed what I would change it, because I think it gets more and more difficult to be with someone 7 days a week, etc. But no, that wasn't my initial wish and wouldn't have been my wish, if I'm honest.
And my answer to your question is slightly layered. First of all, Siobhan and I are single, so whatever we say as advice or our opinions obviously means jack nothing, because we're still single, so we can't necessarily preach on this. When you say about, but I think when you look at your own background and you're dating, it's like asking, well, what's the property prices like? If you ask about property, it depends where the property is, how old the property is, how well it's maintained, where it's going, and what the market is at the time. And is it a cash buyer? It's impossible just to say black and white what the answers are to these things. However, I would say in our age group, I'm 52 tomorrow, you're in it's almost like the washing machine cycle's finished and you're just still kind of coming out and going into the dating apps. Because if you're 22, people bumble along, and the intrinsic thing of what you want is to find somebody. You overlook that bad behavior, or you date somebody for a few. When you're a bit older, you're either a bit jaded or certainly sharper, and you don't mess around as much. You think, I'm not going to put up with that because I don't want to. I don't need to. I've got my own house. You've got kids usually, or whatever your setup is, so you step back a little bit. But the one thing I would say, recently one of our experts that we had something, and I think it was when we were interviewing Jan Leeming, because she'd been married 6 times, I think, Siobhan. Was it 6? She said quite a few relationships. We were talking about trusting your gut instinct. When you fancy somebody, you fancy somebody.
Yeah.
And nobody can deny that feeling that you have, and it might not last, but you can look at somebody that somebody else wouldn't find attractive, but you think, there's something about that person that makes me find them interesting, and maybe there's a potential mate there. But the expert, I said, well, is it good to trust your gut instinct? Because my gut instinct over the years has led me up the garden path to the wrong type of woman, or not the right person. And I think a lot of people could say the same. It's like, I keep going for the wrong type of man. I keep ending up with the wrong relationship with a woman, and that's my gut instinct. And she was very clear. She said, you can trust your gut instincts if you've done the work on yourself. Now, that's a big question mark, isn't it? Doing the work on yourself. But I think it's a really good point that you can trust yourself if you're in a place that you think, right, well, I keep going out with the wrong type of narcissistic woman, or a woman that's obviously going to be 10 years too younger for me, that wants different things. Once you've done that, you can start to work out where you should be going on dating. But I think, we can all make the same mistake, because, I'm not dating every weekend. It's once every couple of weeks or months now.
So where are you both looking for dates, as it were, now? Are you just doing it sort of organically more and away?
I go to hospitals, the morgue, shopping. I have a big A4 sign that I have on the side of the road. Just honk if you fancy me. I do pretty much everything now.
Well,
How about you, Sean?
I've taken a leaf out of Tamsin Outhwaite's book. We were having a chat the other day, and she said, I'm in a relationship with myself, and my kids come first, and I'm just taking some time out to be with me. And I think, yeah, I'm a bit like Tim. Every couple of months, particularly because we have the show, I don't think it's very fair to be going on there and not trying. So occasionally I do, but yeah, at the moment I'm in a relationship with myself, Elliot.
How's that going?
It's going very well.
She argues a lot with herself.
My relationship with myself is the longest one I've had, actually. It's probably it's going to work out. But so on relationships with both of you, because I've spoke to you both separately as well, and you two have got a fantastic relationship. So what's your guys' history in terms of, like, you're great friends, obviously. How did you guys meet? Because you're really close, aren't you, both of you?
Well,
no.
Oh, you this is the honest truth. I did once say to Tim, do you remember where you met me? Because he didn't. I interviewed him. I interviewed him. He couldn't remember when it was or where it was. So, yeah, well, do you remember now when it was even? You were looking
No.
at no, so you don't. It was for Leslie. It was for Leslie when you'd been down to Ballingdon and she needed someone to talk about.
Sorry.
Yeah. So
I do remember that.
yeah. So it was probably what, 5, 6, 7 years ago? I don't know.
Is that all?
No, yeah, it's not even that, I don't think.
Is it not?
I've got a benchmark. I've got 6-year-old children, so it was probably 4 years ago.
Okay, post the children. So
No. But it's obviously get on well, and we obviously have certain similar traits, and we both come from a media background. The podcast just kind of, it's quite natural. We know each other well enough that we can be a bit fun with it, and without not being too precious. Because I don't think you can really force that. Well, you've been on your own big high profile reality show. You can't force personalities to get together or not. That's why Ant and Dex still work together, because there's a real rapport with them.
In terms of, like, you've both had fantastically interesting lives, both worked abroad in the States. Tim, you did Miss World, didn't you?
So I'm the only person to have hosted both Miss World and Miss USA, which are their rivals. And Miss World I did 4 times in places like China, in London, and all over the world. And Miss USA I did in Los Angeles at the Kodak Theatre, which is where they do the Oscars. And that was a very interesting one because that was with Donald Trump. Donald Trump owned Miss USA at the time. I'd worked with him quite a bit because when I was based in the States for 4 years, he was the face of The Apprentice. So I would go to Long Island with him to the polo. I went to his wedding. I went to Mar-a-Lago, various bits and pieces over the years. So it was a very interesting time. But one of the jobs that I did out there was Miss USA and Miss World. And everybody always thinks you're going to end up with a Miss World when you host it. But it's a fantastically glamorous job to do. The very first time I did it, I was living in New York, and they have a 2-week lead up to filming when they're out there. And the first time it was in China, in Sanya, and they have the bikini rounds and they have all the, walking around beaches and stuff. And because of my commitments with work, I could only fly it to do the actual hosting of the main show, which is very technical. It's 8 cameras. It's live for 3 hours on on the network, the rival to my other show. And it's really hard because a lot of the girls don't even speak English or very well. And then you have to kind of work around all those technicalities, and you're on a big theatre and it's a big show and there's lots of names that you've got to pronounce. There's even countries that you don't know. But the first time I went out there, I flew in and the car took me straight to the theatre in China, in Sanya. And they just threw us an updated script and said, go on stage now, because this is the last time we'll be rehearsing, because the live show was 2 nights later. This is the last time we're rehearsing the final bit when you go, ladies and gentlemen, the last time to see the future Miss World, and 132 Miss Worlds come out onto the stage in their rehearsed period and how they come down. And I just stood there in my jeans with the mic, and I hadn't obviously met any of them, and 132 Miss Worlds come out in their jeans and various bits and pieces, but for their position. And I just started giggling, because all of a sudden you're surrounded by 132 of the most gorgeous looking women of each country all coming onto the stage. And it's absolutely gobsmacking, really, to see it. And although it's not massive in this country, it's massive everywhere else.
Was you single when you was doing this?
Yeah. But you don't really, well, I've done it 4 times. You don't really spend that much time with the girls because they're on their best behaviour because they want to be chosen as Miss World. You're not at the bar at 3 a.m. doing tequila slammers saying, I'll see you in the morning and we'll carry on. There is, after I've announced who's won, they always have a Miss World ball where all the girls can finally let their hair down and have a few drinks. And I've heard stories over the years that, they let their hair down. But personally, I'm always getting on the next flight out because I've got to get back somewhere. But it's a very fun thing to do, and I'm very glad that I can put that on my CV.
And Siobhan, with yourself, you've been a journalist for. Have you always done journalism? Always been in journalism?
Yeah, I'm way less interesting than Tim. I was a journalist on the side. No, well, it's true. I mean, my background is journalism. I didn't even do celebrity journalism until 10 years ago. And I've used to always have I did a radio slot for a while, but that was by persuasion. And this is the first time I've ever been in front of a camera doing this podcast with Tim. It's really not my background at all. I like to be
You
behind.
lived in New York though as well.
I did live in, yeah, I did. I lived in New York when I was working for The Sun. I had a column called Women with Attitude, which is people like Trudy Styler on the rainforest, but also people, I love Americans. New York is such a fun place to be. They had this place called the Learning Annex, and I would go down and find people that were lecturing in things like how to steal someone's husband or how to be a bitch. So these really sort of like fun topics, and I had a great time. And then I came home to get married. Otherwise, I don't know if I ever would have come home. I did love New York. I loved the aliveness.
Me too.
Yeah.
But you were a journalist in probably the best times of the newspapers as well. And that must have been a great time, especially at the Sun, because it was huge, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose, but it's the same everywhere. You know, it's hashtag save print, which is very much a personal thing for me. Because the choice is so much bigger, and TV for Tim as well. You know, it used to be 4 channels, 5 channels. Now it's like hundreds and hundreds. Same with print. You know, you can get your news just by going on your phone or what have you. So it's just ever decreasing circles. And we used to have massive staffs. I mean, here's an example. I think The Sun was probably, at that time read by about 3 million. Now it's sort of 1, and that's one of the bigger titles. And the same with magazines and everything. It's just ever decreasing circles, really, without being depressing. It's just, we're just working out how we consume news and TV shows, etc. I think we're in a period of flux. That was a bit serious,
For
wasn't it?
both of you, no, I think it's really interesting because this is the first time that I've done anything other than my profession, and I've found, just from scratching the surface and being on the outside, that it looks like a very, very competitive, cutthroat industry, and you must both have extremely thick skin to sort of maintain being in it.
I mean, Tim can answer for himself, but I'd say it's a lot harder in his industry than mine.
Yeah.
We're not competing.
I don't have I completely agree with you. I don't tend to have any other famous friends. I know famous people, but because it is quite cutthroat, and I'm always kind of like innocent until burnt every single time. But you rely on doing the job really well, and that gets you the work. The problem is when nowadays you don't have to do the job that well. It's more about your Instagram followers to be, but that's not a little violin. That's just an observation of how it is, because things always change. Like you say, it's in flux.
Have you both sort of embraced that Instagram? Is it something that it's not really, you don't like it?
I would suggest that Tim's obviously made me embrace podcasting, and now I'm really, really pleased that I've done it, because the thing is, you can't. I'm not thinking you. No one is. We can't change the fact that it's going to change the way we consume media, etc. So you just have to go with it. And yeah, actually, I'd say I'm having a lot of fun on Suddenly Single, particularly.
Yeah, I don't think either of us are really up on Instagram though, and what we should be doing and all that. If you look at the progress of how Suddenly Single looks over the last few months, we went from being on 2 high stools, like with 2 candles underneath us for lighting, 1 mic that was working, and we're like Indian fakers on these high stools trying to talk. And now there's a sofa and a better lighting. Everything's progressing, but neither of us know how to really do all that stuff. I personally find Instagram a lot of work, because you're editing stuff and you have to put it together and you have to work out what you're going to do. And that's not me. I like interviewing people. That's my skill or enjoyment. Anything else, it's like building a house. You can if we were on an island, you'd be able to rescue us. Whereas I'd be there trying to make it some coconuts, bloody I don't know, cocktails. But I like doing renovations, but I'm not a hands-on person. But I like the bigger picture, the creative side of it.
So What's one of your standout interviews for both of you, not just on Suddenly Single, but generally through your careers that you look back and it's a memory, whether it's interviewing for you, Siobhan, or on a red carpet for you, Tim? Who would that be? Like the one person that you would pick out?
It's easy for me.
Well, you go, Siobhan, first.
Gloria Estefan. I was really young. I was probably, I don't know, it was one of my first jobs, maybe even like 20. And it was ridiculous, really. I asked if I could interview her, and I didn't think I'd get a yes. And she said yes. And she was not only was such a big star at the time with Miami Sound Machine, she was so charming and grounded. She talked to me about obviously being Cuban, and her dad was sprayed with Agent Orange by the Americans, and what's her husband's name? He was her Swengali. Honestly, by the time I left the interview, not only did I think she was wonderful and it gave me this big break because that was a big name back then, I just thought I had a girl crush. I thought she was amazing. And I've never forgotten actually how kind and nice she was, because I was really green, like really green. There you go.
Well, so Access Hollywood, the show that I've been associated with for 20 years, when I moved out there in 2005 to take over the co-presenting job, it was on, it still is, it's on 6 nights a week, but it was a huge, and still in many ways is a show. But at that point, for 3 years, 4 years I was out there. Every single day you were off doing something, be it go to Cannes for 2 weeks, then you're flying to Sundance Film Festival. Tomorrow you're interviewing Enrique Iglesias and we're doing a helicopter trip over there. Then you're going out to Cannes to do this. Then you're going off to wherever it's the set of Desperate Housewives. Then you're on Mission Impossible in Dubai. So you were always constantly doing. So that any of the stars from around the early 2000s to about 2015 pretty much had a lot to do with Robert De Niro used to call me Tolerable Tim. You know, you get on chatting terms with a lot of them, and even socially a little bit. But my favourite one happened to be the arc of when I started on Access. When I first started, and of course, you know, they sent me out to New York for a month to audition me. So I was still on the show every day. So I was kind of aware of how big the show was. I had to go back to London, to York, actually. It was ironic, to do Panto that I had signed up to do. So I went from New York to York, then back out to New York with this new contract, 3-year contract initially. And one of the first things, and all the producers on it, it's like a TV show within a TV show. They're all competing with each other to get exclusives and get this, and like, oh, I've got the latest with J-Lo, she's going to do this and that. And one of the producers, one of the regular ones, said, we're going to an agricultural fair in New Jersey because Bruce Willis is going to be there because he's friends with the guy that does this agriculture fair, and it's America, so it's a massive thing. And we're going to try and get a quick interview with him. Now, normally you have publicists and you chat and it's all being set up and you're going to do it. Anyway, I was dispatched with the camera crew. And to show you how big the show was, we had 3 full-time camera crews and sound guys on the show. You know, it was like Hillside Blues, this big show. So we go down there, and Bruce Willis is walking through the agricultural fair. The reason they particularly wanted to get him was he'd just flown back from Los Angeles from Demi Moore's wedding to Ashton Kutcher. So, and he hadn't talked about it. Nobody spoke about it. So I was relatively innocent with the camera crew and go to him and go, hi, Bruce. Why was it important for you to be here today? He says, oh, my friend's doing this. And he's walking along. And I go, and can you tell us a little bit about what the wedding was like? You've just come back from your ex-wife's wedding to me. And I had my Access Hollywood mic, and he just gave me the dirtiest look ever. So much so that when they played it on the show that evening, say, look at our plucky Brit who got the question nobody else could from Bruce Willis. What happened at the wedding? They put red thunder from his eyes, lightning coming out to me as a part of a joke. Anyway, that's that. And I was a bit mortified, thinking, oh my God, I didn't realize he'd be so upset, not thinking, oh, you have to go through publicists normally. And about 10 days later, they were going through who I was interviewing for that week. Or you got to go tomorrow, you're doing a preview of this, then you go, and then you're going to do a sit down interview with Bruce Willis. And I went, hold on, Bruce Willis? Only last week, you know, he was giving me the evils on the show. And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. And I thought, I am worried about it because he gave me the evils. And at the time, you know, he was the big action star. So when we sat down to do the interview, either because I'm stupid or a bit cheeky, But when we sat down, and how it works when you do those interviews, they're slightly different now. But our show and Extra and ET and maybe Vogue will all take room suites in a hotel next to each other. And Bruce and whoever else you're doing the interviews will come to that suite and come into each suite and have 10 minutes. And the publicist will pop their head round the door first, going, "Is everybody ready? Bruce is in the building. He's coming in fight. Is everybody ready?" And the camera going, yeah, everything's ready. The lights are ready. So you're already going, my God, you know. And obviously, it had got off to a very public bad start with him. And eventually, Bruce comes and sits down. And look, he looks fantastic, Bruce. He sits down in his seat and kind of looks, you know. And they said, "Okay, we got 10 minutes. Is everybody ready? Start." And 10 minutes is quite a long time. And I just said to him, "Bruce," I said, "first of all, can I say I'm a huge fan of yours. I genuinely am. And I love some of the films that you've done. And I think you're really adventurous in some of the roles that you've chosen, including this film today. But can we just start afresh? Because we got off to a bad start. And I'd like to ask you some proper, serious questions about you and your craft." He spent about 30 seconds just going, looking me up and down like I was a little mouse. And then he goes, "Sure." And I go, "Thank you. Do you wear boxer shorts or briefs?" As the first question. The whole room was already quiet, but everybody went even quieter. Their sphincters went, "Huh?" And his publicist was like that. They were all like, how dare this idiot say that? He looked at me and he took about 10 seconds and then he burst out laughing. He actually thought, I can't believe somebody's been that cheeky twice. So he just went, "Oh, well, it's those boxer shorts for me," because and then we got on like a house on fire. To the point, he had a bit of a reputation for being prickly, and a lot of people do, and you know. But every single red carpet, if he was ever on a red carpet, he would ignore people, see me, come over, put his hands on the barrier, and have a little chat to me, and say, "Hey, how are you?" And then he'd go off again, and all the other journalists would always go, "Have you got pictures of him nude? Why does he always come up to you?" I'm like, "I don't know, he's just a nice guy." "Well, he is to you." So that's my favourite Bruce Willis and story, because it was he's a very intelligent guy. And actually, if you read about him, he's a very generous guy. He's done a lot of things for a lot of people that he quietly does.
They're both brilliant. I mean, Gloria Estefan and Bruce Willis. They're both. It's a fantastic job to be in when you're getting to sort of those stages, right? Surely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the guests that we've had on Suddenly Single have been pretty amazing, actually. We've had your good self, but we've had all kinds of interesting celebs. Some we should have.
We have, and I'll be honest, I think my favourite is John Leeming. Because,
Really?
yeah.
You said to me the other day that...
Well, coming up, we've got, I don't know when this is going out, with Kelly Maloney, I think is going to be our most honest, don't you, Tim?
Yeah, Kelly Maloney has got a fantastic story, transitioned in the last few years from being Frank Maloney, a boxing promoter that had done incredibly well in a very masculine arena, and was very candid and came down and sat and charmed everybody, really, without trying, because she was so honest about her journey and what she'd gone through, but with no airs of graces about it either. So I think it was a very interesting interview, which is yet to air. But then, we've also got people like Katie Price that we did, and that was equally interesting. And we've also got Erika Johnson coming up.
I know you said to me, Siobhan, that you had, was it 70,000 hits within the first hour with Jan Leeming, wasn't it?
No, it was 27,000 hits within the first 24 hours, but it was huge for a woman of 82. But that does show you how many people over 50 are single and are interested in what we're doing. I think we've hit on quite a good format, if I do say so myself.
Definitely, because we've had this discussion before already. I think that people get to the stage where they want to find more, especially after their kids are grown up and left, and they want more out of their life. So we're now looking for more out of their lives, and they're all in that stage of their life. And I think like the demographic of the audience is sort of pretty much over 50. I mean, I've been amazed on Instagram how many messages that I've had and stories I've had, probably like you guys as well, of people that are still, they want to find love, they want to find companionship. I think there's a fear of maybe being alone, which I think people need to sort of come to terms with, because I don't think we're ever alone. And I do think finding love in yourself is probably the most important thing to do before you're even happy with everyone else. I think a lot of people are looking for happiness in other people, that it's not going to give them happiness. It's just going to make a relationship. And I've found that I don't know about you two now, but I've found that I'm very comfortable on my own, and I'm quite happy on my own, and anything else would be a bonus.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think with Suddenly Single, we haven't really touched on any kind of, because I always think, well, which are the good apps to be on? How do you actually physically meet somebody now? Where do you go as stage one to meet somebody? Because the apps, I think, for me, and anecdotally, are not working for a lot of people these days.
Yeah.
They don't work. There's not a very good selection of people on there. People have app fatigue about it. And we had another guest on, Candice, it was Candelicious or whatever, her Instagram page.
I saw her, yeah.
And she organised dating events when she was living in Singapore, and she's on a quest at the moment doing different dating things every single week. And that was fascinating to hear, because a lot of these dating apps are now arranging live nights where you just turn up and you get a ping on your phone and say, right, go and find Siobhan, you've got 10 minutes, and then ping, go and find Jenny, and it makes you move around and you can physically meet people, which I think certainly for us is a better way of meeting people, because at least you get some impression of them in the flesh.
So we think we might do that next year, Tim, throw an event to which Elliot is invited already.
We're thinking of doing a Suddenly Single dating night for a bit of fun, get some bubbles in, and at least have half a dozen, well, more than half a dozen, but a few people that are single that mingle.
I definitely think it's the way forward, because I've looked at the dating apps a few times in terms of how they work. And I think whatever idea you come up with that you think maybe has got legs on it, I think human nature, people will strip it down to its bare minimum anyway. You know, it'll always be guys sending pictures of stuff that they probably shouldn't. And get, you know, I don't think it matters which way round you do it. Unfortunately, that seems to be like the story of all of the dating apps when you speak to women as well. And I think that's just human.
Why on earth do you think sending me a picture of you in a bathtub, and that's being polite, why would it? No woman is turning up. I'm just putting that out there now.
I'm going to say I've never ever, because of my job, I've never ever done it, and I don't think I would, because it wouldn't be attractive. But I do know lots of women that have these groups and these chats where they actually have got a catalogue of men in bathtubs, if you like, that they sort of share with each other, that they're constantly getting, and they have a good old laugh over it half the time, sort of over a glass of wine, and say, look at this, and you know, I've received this. But I don't get that whole sort of Richard picture thing. I don't get it.
Like old pictures, you know, like Tim's had that a lot, haven't you? Pictures of people from 10 years ago.
Yeah, I've had a couple of dates where, not recently, but a few years ago, where you turned up and I thought, I've either having a cataract over my eyes, but they don't look quite like they're coming, and they'd be coming in close and close, thinking, Christ, that's her. She looks more like a mother. So you have those things. You think, but we always say, Siobhan and I, it doesn't matter if it's the weight, the age, you're going to get found out if you're actually physically going to meet somebody at some point. But there's some bare bones of tips that we picked up along the way that I think really stand out. Is don't go backwards and forwards with somebody that you met on a dating app for too long. Keep it minimum, because you haven't got the time and you might not like them when you see them, even if you think there is something. And it lessens your expectations, because you're just going to go out and meet them. You're not thinking about it for a month. And then go for a coffee or a drink. You can always make an excuse to stay longer if you want to. But I have made the mistake in years gone past of arranging dinner for the first time. You're thinking, oh my God, I want to drown myself in the soup. I can't want to get out of it. This is disgusting. But, you know, it's not brain surgery. I always say you've got to be in the race to win it. If you're not meeting people, you're never going to find anybody.
Listen, guys, I'm aware you're... Sorry, Siobhan?
I said you can come to our first soiree, Elliot. That's where it's all going to happen for you.
I'm always up for a soiree of any description, whatsoever. But listen, I'm aware you're both extremely busy. Siobhan, I know you're visiting friends. Tim, I know you've got loads to do as well with probably A-list celebrities. Honestly, thank you so much for coming on and joining me.
My pleasure.
And check out Suddenly Single, guys, because it's a great watch. All of the episodes are great. You might get to my one; it's not so great, but it was great being with you two. But thank you so much. It's a great podcast. It's doing extremely well, and like I say, it's going from strength to strength. Over 3 million followers now as well, which is
Brilliant.
fantastic for both of you. I'm really pleased with both of you. Thank you for coming on, guys. It's been a real pleasure just listening to both of you talk. Thank you.
Cheers, Elliot.
Bye, Elliot. Bye.
Okay. Thank you for watching 50 Shades and Grey again, and thank you to my guests, Tim Vincent and Siobhan Wykes, for coming on and talking about their podcast and about their life experiences. It's been great to have you. Thank you so much, guys. Don't forget, everyone, download and make sure you follow and subscribe below, and share about the channel. It's great to have you all on and all watching, and thank you for following. Take care. Bye-bye.